Welcome to this component which focuses on how to identify measures to overcome barriers. This component will look into how to translate barriers into solutions or into measures. Secondly, it will look into how to compose a set of complementary measures into programs. And finally, it will look at how to assess the cost, the effects, and the benefits of sets of measures or programs. Translating barriers into solutions, that can be done when we look at the problem tree by identifying the root cause of a problem, which is here described as an information gap. A natural response to an information gap would be a measure being an information campaign. So that's basically how barriers are translated into measures. I will go into more details on that when we come to the market mapping tool, which we have discussed in a previous session, which is focusing on market chain actors and the linkages between the actors. It's focusing on the service providers which stimulate the functioning of this market chain and the enabling business environment which sets the rules of the game for the functioning of the market chain. I will continue an example from the barrier analysis component where we identified a number of actors in the value chain. We had the consumers of solar PV systems on the left side. We had the importers of wafers and panels here on the right side. We had local producers in the middle, and we had retailers and wholesalers here in the middle. And we had established the links between these market actors. We also established a number of specific barriers for this system to improve and to be more efficient. So an increased number of PV systems could be sold to the consumers. One of these barriers were the low quality of products. And if we should think of how to translate this barrier into a solution, one opportunity could be a test station for quality control. Another identified barrier was the high cost of imported production for wafers and for panels. And solutions might be many, but one of them could be an exemption of the import tax. We have also identified high interest rates on loans for consumers. One measure to address this barrier could be a subsidy on interest rates. There could be others. We identified high cost on finance for various actors. One of the solutions, or a solution, could be innovative finance, which of course consists of a number of sub-measures. It's more an idea than it is a concrete set of measures. Here we see that this measure will address the consumers, it will also address the retailers, and it will address the assembly panel factory. So in this case, we might even think of having different innovation native finance for each of the three groups. We identified low awareness as a barrier, low awareness of products available on the market as a barrier to for the consumers, and a reasonable response to that would be an information campaign. We identified a barrier which is poor industry conditions. A measure to this could be improved industry conditions. Again, a whole box of measures which need to be more detailed. We identified that sales were not coordinated. A response to that could be and facilitation of linkages between these market actors. And we identified that there were a bad match between components from the battery producer and the panel producer. And a solution to that could be a stimulated producer coordination. These were the specific barriers identified in the example. In the example, we also had a number of more general barriers at this level, the enabling framework level. And these barriers are in generally more difficult to address because they are related to more fundamental problems in society. So the solutions here will also be mentioned like very broad solutions for the time being, and to address these, one will need to go much more into detail afterwards. The first of those would be low contract enforcement, and we have put here improved enforcement, poor trade standards, improved trade standards, unclear finance policy, better finance policy, and corruption control. Although we know that this needs to be much more detailed to be of much value. We identified other general barriers such as a low research capacity. Here it could be support to research and development, which could be the measure. We identified low technical skills. A measure to that could be training and capacity building. We identified poor market information, and a response to that could be better market information. So, what did we learn from this exercise? We learned that one barrier has several optional measures. We also learned that experience from other sectors and from abroad is very important. We need to know what is working and what is not working based on experience from these sectors. We also learned that measures need to be detailed and specific to be of any values. No headlines, we need to have a narrative on the details of the measures. And we also learned that measures should complement each other to form a set of measures or a program to be efficient. One could think that just addressing the economic measures, addressing the economic barriers would be sufficient, but experience tells us that it's important to address all the detailed barriers in the system to make a cost-efficient solution. So, what are the next steps? The next steps is to create at least 2 different sets of measures, and it is to conduct a cost-benefit analysis of each of these sets. What are the costs and what are the benefits in order to choose between the 2? And the prioritization should be done according to existing national policy. But it's also important to discuss the 2 options with members of the TNA committee and with the politicians before inclusion in the action plan. To illustrate how we can make an evaluation of these programs or sets of measures, I have here created an example of a program for stimulating rooftop installations for school and institutions. The program consists of a subsidy scheme where an investment subsidy is given for each unit installed. The subsidy scheme gives a relatively high subsidy in the first years, but declining over 5 years, whereafter it stops. There is establishment of a test center to ensure the good quality of the products which are subsidized. There is an awareness campaign which will provide information about the subsidy scheme, about the opportunities of buying cheaper and better products. And there will be a training component for technicians in order to improve the quality of the installations. And there will also be a program administration which will be financed through all the years. To calculate the cost and the benefits of such a program, we need to establish a baseline. How many installations or systems would be sold if there was no program, and how many installations would be sold as an effect of this new program. When we have these scenarios, the baseline scenario and the program scenario, it's possible to calculate the effects or the benefits compared to a baseline. We will be able to calculate or estimate the employment benefits. We will be able to calculate the CO2 emission reduction, which is also considered as a benefit, and we will be able to calculate the cost compared to the baseline. This can be the cost per extra installation, the cost of the CO2 reduction, and the cost related to employment. To give you more details on how the cost and benefits are evaluated in this situation, we will present the two scenarios here, the baseline scenario and the program scenario, which is showing the number of systems installed as effect of this subsidy scheme. We see here the first years there is a strong increase due to the subsidy, and that this increase will continue after year number 5 when the subsidy has stopped, because the assumption in this case is that the subsidy scheme has stimulated the market to a level where the cost has declined, so this technology is now competitive. But what were the costs of this program, or what are the estimation of the cost of this program? We see here that there is the cost for the test center, for the awareness campaign, for the technical training, and for the program administration, which will run over all the 10 years which we are looking at. And we see the cost of the subsidy scheme here, which is only costs which will occur the first 5 years. So in this situation, or this example, we see that the subsidies is the most important cost element. But subsidy levels can of course be adjusted, and it will depend on how much weight you put on each of these program elements. And this is what the evaluation is about. So, summing up, we have in this component focused on how to translate barriers into solutions. We have illustrated how to compose a set of complementary measures to include in the program, and we have focused on how to assess the cost, the effects, and the benefits of these measures or these programs in order to be able to choose between them. And we have highlighted that it's important to discuss these different sets of measures with politicians or in various fora before including them into the technology action plan, which is the final goal of this exercise and to which we will return in the next component. If you want to have more detailed information about how to identify measures to overcome barriers, you are welcome to consult Chapter 6 in the second edition of the guidebook, which is available at the project website.